while that's going around, this next section we're going to talk about very briefly is what makes stocks go up and down in the short run and in the long run. But before we go to that, I asked Becky to leave this up because this is the dilemma that those of us that do this for a living or as a vocation or avocation face all the time. This is a product life cycle, okay? And let's go back and let's use Apple Computer as an example because that's sort of the penultimate growth company out there. I mean, who would have ever thought that iPhones would do what they did, or iPads, or all the stuff that Apple, of course, Apple today announced that they were going to start making inroads into the textbook market and start getting all that in their tablets instead of making people buy. And they were talking about how much textbooks cost at the college level, and you just don't even want to know. I mean, it's like $150, $200, $250 a book for each class. But the point about Apple is, where on this cycle is Apple? Tom, you've been quiet. Are they in the introductory stage, growth, maturity, or decline?
I'd say they're in the growth stage still.
You think they're still here?
Yes.
All right, anybody have a difference of opinion?
I think they've been up and down in the back of growth spurt.
Yeah, and that's the point here, is that companies can reinvent themselves. And the best companies to own are those who, I always say, manage to stay on their A game. In the healthcare sector, it's a Johnson & Johnson. In technology, it's Apple or IBM, which was down, and now they've had a great recovery. Every industry you can think of, the preeminent companies, those whose CEO have managed to execute properly, constantly are reinventing themselves. So while the iPod may be in decline, the iPad is right here. So and so the question then becomes, what value do you put on that stock based on where you think they are in that business cycle? Because I'm going to use an example in just a second of a stock called Netflix, okay? That in the last 6 months has done all of them. Has done the whole gamut. But anyway, let's talk about what moves the stock in the long run and the short run. There was a gentleman by the name of Ben Graham. Has anyone ever heard of the name of Ben Graham? Ben Graham is known as the father of value investing. He was the person who taught Warren Buffett all he knew about value investing. Dr. Turek knows all about Ben Graham and Warren Buffett and all that crowd. And his line, his statement was, in the short run, I hope you do, in the short run, the market is like a voting machine, and in the long run, the market is like a weighing machine. And what he means by that is, in the short run, 1 week, 1 day, 1 hour, 6 months, what moves the stock is supply and demand. The voting machine side of things. If more people vote for it than vote against it, the price goes up. Okay? And I've seen so often stocks do this. They go up and they get a life of their own, and they're talked about on CNBC, and they're talked about everywhere, and the stock just goes up and up and up and up and up, and all of a sudden it starts hitting this point where you start seeing some selling coming into play. And all of a sudden that thing turns over, it hits this part right here, and starts down, and all those people who bought right here, the stock starts going down, and they're like, oh my God, what have I done? I bought this stock at $200 a share, and now it's $150, and it's $100, and it's $75, and it's $50. There is nothing worse in the world than to have caught a hot stock at the top. So what moves the stock in the short run is supply and demand. The other way you can look at it is fear and greed. When it's going up, everybody's greedy. And when it's going down, everybody's fearful. Let me give you a quick example with the stock I mentioned, Netflix. Everybody use Netflix? Anybody here never used Netflix before? God, where are you people? Netflix, I don't use it much either. The point of what Netflix did was they created this wonderful thing where you could go and order movies and they would mail them to your house, and you could keep them as long as you wanted to. When you decided you're done with it, you send it back, they send you another one. A great, great business model. And then they figured out everybody had computers that had lots of speed and capacity, so that the whole concept of streaming video came into play. And man, when that hit, Netflix stock went through the roof. Here's what Netflix did. On January 1st of 2010, Netflix was trading for $55 a share. And then about February or March of 2011 is when all this video streaming became the rage. And this stock hit a high on July 15th of $304 a share. $304 a share. And then the guy who ran the company made the fatal error of saying, well, I'm going to figure out a way to make more money out of this, so we're going to separate these two, but we're going to charge everybody more. And everybody said, punt you, and the stock by November 25th was $63 a share. 55 to 304 to 63. Now, what causes that? Fear and greed. I can tell you, like I said, there is nothing more fearful than to have a tiger by the tail on a stock that's just roaring to the downside. Because the first time it goes down, you go, well, you know, it's okay, I'll put a stop loss in. And then it screams through that, and you go, oh my God, if I bought it for 300, I sure can't sell it for 200. And then it keeps on going down, and it finally falls into what I call prayer mode. You know, if it ever gets back to what I paid for it, you know, I'm going to get out of it. And trust me, even people who do this for a living end up with stocks in prayer mode, so there's nothing wrong with that. So in the short run, what moves the stock? Fear and greed, supply and demand. What moves the stock in the long run? And that's the point that we do for a living every day. And what most people that invest in the stock market should be doing. And that is the things that move the market in the long run are really that handout that just went around. The company's financial health. There is nothing that is more critical to the long-term success or failure of a company than the company's financial health. Let me give you an example here of two companies that 5 years ago were probably on an even footing in terms of their business model. McDonald's and Wendy's. Okay? 5 years ago, McDonald's stock was in the doldrums. They had lost one CEO after another. These guys were dying in office. I mean, while they were CEOs, I mean, they had just had a turnstile at the top. Wendy's, on the other hand, had salad bars, and they had gotten more into breakfast, and they were hitting on all cylinders, and people looked at them as a healthy alternative to greasy spoons. 5 years ago, if you had put $10,000 into Wendy's stock, today it would be worth around $2,400. Conversely, McDonald's $10,000 5 years ago would have grown to be worth a little bit over $22,000. So, in 5 years, McDonald's has more than doubled, which, if you use the rule of 72, says it increased at greater than 14–15% rate for the last 5 years, while Wendy's has taken the southern route. Nothing is more critical to the success or failure of a company's stock than its financial health. There are, though, other things that come into play. An industry's financial health. We used the example earlier of Kodak. You know, years ago when I first started doing the stock market game and I talked to students, I'd say, how many kids in here have a camera that uses film? And, you know, it'd be half the hands. And then a year or two later I'd do it, and there'd be 2 hands, and then there were no hands. That ought to tell you that the film business was in big trouble. And Polaroid was the first one to bite the dust, and now Eastman Kodak has bit the dust. You know, there ain't going to be any more film. So an industry's financial health has a lot to do with how a stock acts. And I can tell you, for those of us who are within the baby boom generation, we have created this monster that has moved through the economic system in the last 30, 40 years. Whether it's housing starts, buying washer and dryers to everything that the boomers have used. Now what's happened is the boomers are more into the let's retire, we have everything we need. You wonder why companies that make stuff for new home construction are dying on the vine. You know, part of our housing problem is because of demographic changes. So anyway, what's important to understand is an industry's financial health as well as a company's financial health. World and national events. What unglued the stock market back in July and started having it going up and down 800 points a day was the fact that the mess in Europe, the Greeks, the Italians, the Spaniards, the Portuguese, the Irish, all these economies that have hit the skids because they took on too much debt, finally overloaded the system. And what really overloaded the system was when it came to light that the interconnectivity between the European banks and the U.S. banks, so that if Societe Generale went down, it was going to take Morgan Stanley along with it. That's what unhinged our market. And we're still now having a lot of volatility. Not near as much as we did, but we still have a lot of volatility. And it has to do with world and national events. The Arab Spring. What a perfect example of that. You know, again, when I've gone and talked to groups, I've used the fact that 9/11 for a lot of kids would have been one of those seminal moments they would never forget. Now, if you say something to kids in middle school about 9/11, it's like talking about World War II to them. I mean, they have no recollection of it. But things like, you know, that, things like when John F. Kennedy got killed, Pearl Harbor, there were just moments that just changed our world. And we've never quite been the same after 9/11. And the last thing that really moves stocks are economic trends. It's almost, and Becky was showing us a slide up here a minute ago, when the economy is good, the stocks that do the best are those that make products and services that need a good economy. Copper, the housing market, you know, what we call consumer discretionary stocks, restaurants, the list goes on and on. But when the economy looks like it's not doing well, then everybody goes back into their little home, and the things that sell the best are the toothpaste, the Crest, the Procter & Gamble products, you know, stuff that we, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola. Those would be examples of stocks that do the best when the economic times are tough. So here's the dilemma that you have not only for these kids playing the stock market game, but you as investors, is where are we on the economic cycle? What industries are on the way up rather than the way down? Do you overpay, do you underpay for stock? I mean, all these things have to enter into decisions on buying and selling stocks. But the biggest thing of all is, if you stay with a company whose financial health is grade A, who has managed to continually reinvent themselves and stay on their A game, those who use the stocks that make people the most money over time. Questions?